You're with Newsfeed, the AM edition. I'm Ayanda Ngati. Great to have you with us. Now, AfriForum is taking President Cyril Ramaphosa to task on the issue of farmer tax. The lobby group has filed an official complaint with the United Nations claiming Ramaphosa and former Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Lindiwe Sisulu, are trampling on the organization's status as a human rights defender. This after the rubbish claims by U.S. President Donald Trump that there were massive farmer tax in the country. To talk to us about all of this, we're joined now by AfriForum's Deputy CEO, Ernst, who joins us via Skype. Mr. Roets, thanks very much for your time. Perhaps a good place to start is by ventilating what Trump actually said, because this is, I understand, at the heart of the issue. Do you think what he said was accurate?
Well, what the U.S. President Donald Trump said on Twitter was that,
I can't remember the exact words, but he said that he's something along the lines of that he's concerned about the attacks on farmers, or I think he said white farmers in South Africa, and land grabs in South Africa, and that he has instructed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to look into this. So there's this big controversy whether he lied or not. Basically, what he said is that he's taken note that there's a problem and that he needs to find out what the extent of the problem is.
Well, I think it's a bit more complex than that. I've got the exact wording in front of me, so let me assist us. He said, and I'm taking this verbatim now, I have asked Secretary of State, that's obviously Mike Pompeo, to closely study the South African land and farm seizures and expropriations, and I think this is where the heart is, the large-scale killing of farmers. Do you think there's large-scale killing of farmers in South Africa?
There is undoubtedly a large-scale killing of farmers. The rate of farmers in South Africa. Sorry?
And what substantiation do you have to back those claims?
Well, I've been doing research on the topic since 2012. I've published a book on the topic. The murder rate in South Africa, if you calculate it as a per 100,000 murder rate, is about 34 people out of every 100,000 people who are murdered in South Africa, which is extremely high.
No, hold on. That's not true.
Difficult.
Ernst, that's not true. That's not true. The government statistics that you have quoted when you were speaking on Fox News actually give us a different number. You quoting a 34.8, it's actually 57.7, 5.7, I beg your pardon, per 100,000 farmers, if you calculate it, because there were actually just 62 farm murders. That was between 2017 and 2018. So where are you getting your numbers?
No, sir. Where are you getting your numbers? That's completely wrong. That's not even the police's numbers. How do you calculate that?
62 farmers, 62 murders, that is, between 2017 and 2018. Do we agree on that?
It's around there. It's close to that number, yes.
Right. So if that's the premise, that calculates to about 5.7 per 100,000 farmers.
Let me explain to you how you need to do the calculation. You need to calculate how many farmers are there in South Africa. Then you need to calculate how many farm murders were there. Then you need to calculate how many of the people who were murdered are farmers, are commercial farmers, because I think what you're doing is you're just dividing the amount of murders by the amount of people who live on farms. And that's not an accurate calculation. So the only calculation that you can make effectively is the rate at which commercial farmers are being murdered. So there's roughly 32,000 commercial farmers. It's maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less in South Africa. Then you need to say, let's say there were 60-something farm murders. Then you need to say how many of the people who were murdered were commercial farmers, and it would be something in the 50s probably. And then you need to say, you need to make that calculation, and then you divide that by 100,000. Then you reach the number, and the number is somewhere close to 100 per 100,000. It's not 5 per 100,000. I have no idea how you got to that.
All right, look, and you and I can ventilate this, I guess, ad nauseum, because I've triple-check this, but let's move on. Given the context, though, that this is all taking place in, crime in South Africa is widely known. I think there's no debate that there are murders across all sectors of society. What makes you think that there's a concerted effort to target farmers in particular?
Well, the point that we made was not that there's a concerted effort. The point that we made is that it's completely disproportionate. There is a concerted effort to an extent where we do know that there are syndicates, and it's been in the news, there are syndicates who operate with the aim of targeting farms. So yes, it is a problem, but the main issue here is that it's completely disproportionate. And if we say farm murders, I don't know why this is always the issue. So, for example, a few years ago, there were 55 police officers, or it was a little bit more, it was 55 per 100,000 at least. So it was somewhere around 100 police officers who were killed in South Africa in a year. And there was this massive uproar saying, how we cannot accept this. Police officers are being killed. It's unacceptable. And it is. If journalists are being killed, it's unacceptable. If estate agents are being killed, it's unacceptable. We've seen all of this. But the moment we talk about farmers being killed, then we have people like, with all due respect, like what you are doing now, who are trying to downplay the problem, who are trying to say, why are you complaining about farmers being murdered? It's very, very severe double standards. And that is exactly the problem that we are trying to raise. That when farmers are being killed, then somehow we need to defend why we are saying this is a problem.
All right. So let me be unequivocal about this, right? The killing of anybody, including farmers, is absolutely not okay on whatever scale. And you say you don't know why this is always an issue. And I'll tell you why. Much of the perception is that AfriForum and other lobby groups that support you are honing in on this particular issue to present a front about what they want the world to believe is happening in this country. And why people always bog down on this particular matter is to apply context to it. So if we want to be able to understand whether or not there's what you say a disproportionate attack on farmers, we need to understand what context this is playing out in. And it's on that basis that this is being centralized. An issue, quite frankly, that I understand was raised in conversations that you've had with various people, including Tucker Carlson in the US, right? And so let's come back to that issue, though, because this is the basis upon which everything started, right? After that interview you had with Tucker Carlson on Fox News, there was widespread backlash, and I think you understand why. It's been a couple of months since this happened. Okay, it's been a couple of months since this happened. In hindsight, do you concede perhaps that there were parts where you misrepresented what's actually happening in the country?
No, if you think I misrepresented anything, then you should point it out to me.
Okay, all right.
I know that there was, to an extent, there was a backlash. I think the backlash was because there's a particular narrative about South Africa that people are trying to hold in place. It's a narrative of the brutal farmers. It's a narrative about the ANC liberating this country. And it's a narrative about white monopoly capital and all of these things. And when you say something on a public platform that isn't aligned with that narrative, then there's a backlash. I didn't say anything. I can't remember saying anything on that program that isn't accurate.
All right, let's jog your memory.
Point that out.
Let's jog your memory quickly. This is a quick segment from that interview where you're speaking to Fox News' Tucker Carlson. Take a listen to this.
Sure.
Has announced that it plans to pursue a policy of taking land away from people on the basis of their skin color. Do you think they'll do that?
Well, that's what was adopted in our parliament in February. A motion was adopted that the property rights clause in the South African constitution has to be changed to allow for expropriation of private property without compensation. So the state president, Cyril Ramaphosa, said that this would turn South Africa into the ultimate paradise and the Garden of Eden. And Deputy President David Mabuza even went further, saying that, basically threatening white farmers that if they do not voluntarily hand over their land to black people, then there would be a violent takeover. So the situation is very dire in South Africa. But the good news is that there's still a process that has to be followed.
So you're right about there being a process that needs to be followed, but I can't seem to remember or find anywhere where Deputy President David Mabuza threatened white people to hand over their land or else there'd be an outbreak of violence. When exactly did he say that? Particularly because it appeared in that clip that you were giving a direct quote.
Well, that's very easy. You've got an iPad in front of you. Google David Mabuza violent takeover. It'll be the first search result that you will find.
Where he said that white people will have violence meted against them if they don't hand over their land. Are you sticking to that?
That's basically his exact words, yes. He said if white people, white farmers do not hand over their property, there's going to be a violent takeover. And he's not the only one who said something like that. Minister Zweli Mkhize said that black people can rest assured that when government embarks on expropriation without compensation, no property of any black person would be targeted. That's what the minister said.
And under which context did this happen? Because perhaps, as you're mentioning, I'm missing it.
It's funny. So first you're saying I'm lying, and then when I point out the evidence, you say, no, maybe there's a problem with the context.
Because the contestation here is about whether or not the evidence exists. So I'm asking you to point me to that evidence. If you're saying it's there, I'm not disputing that.
Type it in on your iPad. You will find it.
Okay, when did the president also speak about the land of milk and honey, a paradise in South Africa, if the land expropriation bill were to go ahead?
Okay, there's an iPad in front of you. Google Cyril Ramaphosa, ultimate paradise. You will find it. He said that.
But these
he
are
said South
comments,
Africa is going to become the Garden of Eden. And he said South Africa is going to become the ultimate paradise in his motivation of why we need expropriation without compensation. Why are you asking me to prove something to you that's already been published? It's supposed to be widely known. It's properly documented. You can do a Google search and you will find that it's there.
Because you're the one who said the words, and it appears nobody else can find them. I'm running out of time. Let's move on.
Okay, no. I'm going to Google it. While we're talking, let me type in.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. You also asked, hopefully you can multitask as well.
You're saying no one can find it. Let's see.
Right, let's multitask as well, running out of time.
First interest, taking land should increase food production. South Africa could turn into the ultimate paradise if the implementation of the policy of expropriation of land without compensation continues, and so forth. So you're saying no one can find it. It's literally the first search result if you type it in Google. Okay, I'm willing to concede that. Let's try and move on. You're also asking the president to safeguard you as a defender of, a human rights defender, I think is the term. Many people disagree with the work that you do. Tell us why that should be the case. Are you asking me why people are saying we're not a human rights defender?
Why we should see AfriForum as a human rights defender, and why that should warrant the president's protection of the organization?
Well, AfriForum is a civil rights organization. We've existed since 2006 with the aim of defending human rights, protecting particularly civil rights and particularly minority rights in South Africa. I mean, our track record is there. So we're at any given stage, we're involved with multiple legal cases in terms of protecting people's rights, and we're involved with multiple campaigns and issues.
I'm asking this because there's widespread perception also, several people have also mentioned how whilst AfriForum is keen on the idea of there being, you say, not necessarily a concerted effort, but there being a campaign, even unofficially so, to target white people and other minorities in the country. The perception is that it's AfriForum actually that has a campaign to discredit the image of the country, even on international platforms. Let me get your response to that.
Well, no, we're not trying to discredit the image of the country. What we are trying to do is to put pressure on the South African government to respond to these problems. Farm murders is a real problem. You can try to deny the extent of the problem, or you can try to use, inaccurate statistics. But the point is, it is a real problem, and it's a problem that is not responded to effectively, and it's something that we wish to raise, and we've tried raising it with the South African government on dozens of occasions. We've had more meetings with government or with police than we can count, and nothing is done about the problem, nothing sufficiently. So yes, the next step is then to put more international pressure on the South African government to do something about this problem. And it's not strange for AfriForum to do this. It's basically a common practice for civil rights organizations to raise international awareness and to get international support.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for your input. That's AfriForum's Deputy CEO, Ernst Roets, joining us there via Skype. I do appreciate your time. It's time for us to take a quick ad break. When we return, we take a look at the impeachment proceedings.